The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our Pregnant at the Office webinar today. We have both employees and employers listening to help moms and moms-to-be manage their stress over the course of their pregnancy. For all those listening, I want to let you know that you can ask any questions in the chat bar of the webinar platform, and we will do our best to answer these at the end of the discussion. All attendees will also be receiving a copy of these slides along with a recording within the next 24 hours. Now, I want to introduce you to our panelists. But first, I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm Katie Bugbee, Senior Managing Editor and Global Parenting Expert at Care.com. And you probably know Care.com is the world's largest online marketplace for finding caregivers, but we are also an employee benefit that many companies offer to help support their employees. I'm also a writer, editor, and mom of 3. Ann Weisberg is also here today. Ann is the Senior Vice President at the Families and Work Institute. If you've heard stats such as only 58% of moms have paid maternity leave, this is an example of the kind of work that FWI does, doing research to help improve workplaces for families and work-life fit. Ann is the mom of 5, the author of Mass Career Customization, Aligning the Workplace with Today's Non-Traditional Workforce, and Everything a Working Mother Needs to Know. And she received her JD from Harvard School. Welcome, Ann. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you.
Okay. Now I want to introduce you to Dr. Melissa Wood, co-director of the Women's Heart Health Program at Massachusetts General Hospital. How stress physically impacts women is of the utmost importance to Dr. Wood, as she works tirelessly to understand cardiovascular disease and improve the clinical care of women. Dr. Wood has designed and implemented the Corrigan Women's Heart Health Program at MGH to help at-risk women. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. And I will also put in there that I am the mother of 4 children and worked part-time throughout my pregnancies and work, and now work full-time. So.
Oh, wow. Thank you for adding that. Okay, and now for all you former naughties and current bumpies out there, it is a special treat to have Julia Wang, site director of thebump.com, here with us today. Julia oversees the editorial team at The Bump, developing compelling and helpful content to help moms and expectant moms through the baby planning and birth. She is also a mom of 2 herself. Welcome, Julia.
Thanks for having me, Katie.
Okay, so let's dive right in here. You're pregnant. Julia, when should employees tell their boss and how?
Okay, this is a really great starting point of the conversation, and the when is really up to the individual. But typically, a good time to share the news with your boss is after the first trimester. And you want to really think about doing this by setting up a face-to-face meeting if you have that opportunity. You certainly don't want to tell your boss in passing, but this is a really great way for you to kind of take of how you want to present this information and kind of get an emotional temperature read on your boss and turn your boss into your ally. So this is an opportunity for you to go in and share the news, as well as sit down and come up with a very proactive plan of how your job is going to be divvied up once you decide that you're going to take maternity leave. So you want to work out some of the arrangements of when you may want to be taking maternity leave, as well as come up with a contingency plan. And the other thing I would say to be really mindful of is to not share anything on social media until you really have that conversation with your manager. Could be social friends with some of your coworkers, and You certainly don't want that information to leak out and have your boss diagnosing yourself. So this is, again, setting up a good line of communication with your boss throughout your pregnancy and beyond.
That's a great tip. And just a reminder for those listening, if you could all mute your session, we are hearing some background noise. But again, for all people listening, if you could microphone, that's a lot better, I think. Okay, thank you. So that's really helpful, Julia. But Anne, I wanted to also talk about how departments should guide the managers within their organizations to respond to this type of announcement.
So thank you for that question. And I also wanted to say that I'm the mother of 3 children and have worked myself full-time and part-time. So I think all of us have had this, have gone through this, personally, and as well as have a connection to this issue. So I think that managers need to understand is that when an expectant parent comes into your office to announce her pregnancy, it's a very sort of vulnerable moment for her. In many ways, she's very excited, but she's also a little bit sensitive about how the news is going to be received. So how you react will really affect how she feels about the whole thing, and she'll remember how you react. I know this from personal experience, and it's, we've seen a lot of sort of anecdotal and research around this. It's an important moment, and I think for the man, the most important thing you can do is to be excited and to express your support. Don't try to push the conversation directly into kind of a benefits conversation, issues around what employees are entitled to are best handled by HR. So you can, offer to say, please talk to our department about all of that. And managers should really focus their attention on working with the team member and the whole team, frankly, on how to manage the work. That's the part that the manager will over and knows most about. So that's what I would recommend.
And perhaps for the initial kind of news breaking, that manager just says, "This is fantastic," and don't worry. We'll talk about this plan as the pregnancy progresses. Keep this a very positive experience. I like that. And hopefully this all happens, but it often doesn't, and the employee is left managing her own support and stress levels. So Melissa, when the ultimate goal is a healthy mom and a healthy baby, what can employees do to set the tone for a healthy pregnancy at work?
Well, I think the first thing is to sort of have your own personal plan for your pregnancy. So sort of what are your health and fitness and nutrition goals? So if one of the things is going to be really trying to bring in most of your food, then really planning that meal in advance, making sure that things are low sodium, lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. And if you don't have the time or organizational ability to do that, then checking and making sure that the food that's available through your employer does meet your nutritional goals. And I think really by showing those around you that you are committed to having the healthiest pregnancy possible, I think people will really go that extra mile to helping you out when you need a favor or when you need to reschedule a meeting due to a conflicting time with a doctor's appointment. I think that's very important. I also think by really trying to demonstrate that you are getting up and you're moving and really, maybe finding a friend or two or colleagues that will walk with you at lunchtime and engaging the group that you work with so that people can see that you're really walking the talk and making every effort to be as motivated as you can about having the healthiest pregnancy possible. I think just demonstrating it will really make it clear to others, and also you will have the best health outcomes.
Great. And And what is, and just a reminder to everyone to mute their microphone and perhaps even the speakers maybe mute while we're speaking, because we are still getting a lot of background noise. Thank you. You know, what is the best, if you're not in the most supportive culture, what is the best way to communicate with your boss that you need more support?
Well, first of all, that you shouldn't just think about your boss, that in many ways it's your peers, your team members that are going to be the ones who can help you the most. So I would think about this issue from that perspective and maybe, you know, talk to your team, especially if it's not as supportive, about kind of what you need and how you can help them. I think you have to always have in mind a sort of dual focus, kind of what you need and also what your team members need to get done, and try to come up with ways to accomplish needs. So do what, you know, whatever the task is in the evening.
You know, it's important to kind of focus on and to talk about you know, with back-to-back deadlines and endless meetings, doctor's appointments. Melissa, what can pregnant employees do during the day to take care of themselves and still be those high-performing workers that we've always been?
Well, to address the second part of the question first, I mean, I think when we do have a lot of things on our plate, and now during pregnancy we're adding those doctor's appointments and maybe the time that needs to be taken to sort of take care of ourselves during the day, I think one of the keys really to achieving that sort of balance between high performance and maybe increased need for time is organization. So really looking at your day, your week, the month until delivery, and kind of engineering actively your schedule so that you can maybe eliminate sort of unnecessary meetings, eliminate unnecessary travel, and eliminate unnecessary work that you may have taken on before you found out that you were pregnant, sort of thinking, well, I can do this if, you know, with my extra time. So things that aren't necessary should sort of be pushed to the back. Also, as part of organizing and you know, engineering your, you need to work on the concept of some flexibility and creativity as you're managing that schedule, recognizing that you need a little bit of flex time if something comes up and you need to go in for an extra visit, you know, just so that you're not worried about. So I think avoiding overscheduling is a big thing because that can lead us to feeling very, very stressed and anxious. And as far as the first part of the question, the things that employees can do during the day-to-day to take care of themselves do include things like, you know, getting out during the day, perhaps, and walking, or at least doing walking inside if there's a, you know, staircase or places where you can walk to get up, improve your circulation in your legs and kind of get that blood flowing. Also, if you need to take a rest, is there, you know, a place where you can just go and perhaps lie down for a few minutes and take a rest? And also remembering, even if you are a high-performing worker bee, that you're busy all the time, you need to drink water and you need to have small snacks throughout the day to keep your blood sugar levels normalized. I think a lot of women when they're not pregnant, and some of them when they are, forget to eat, very, very busy at work. And you may be able to get away with that when you're not pregnant, but when you are pregnant, it's very important to maintain those healthy, blood sugar levels and sort of not letting yourself have these kind of glucose crashes or excessive amounts of sugar that in the blood if you go out and eat an unhealthy snack. So I think those are just some of the things that you can do to achieve that balance.
I think that's great, and it's almost, setting up in terms in time for parenthood. You're kind of prioritizing and organizing your day and work day so that you and this child are the #1 priority, and filling in all of the other around it. Julia, what are you hearing?
Before we move on to the next topic, Dan, I also wanted to say that I just want to challenge a little bit this notion of somebody who's a high performer is working out all the time. And we know that actually people who sort of rest and recover actually end up outperforming people who just work all the time. Working all the time leads to burnout and lower performance. So I think we have to sort of set new habits around that, and even a new mindset around that. And this is as good a time as any to do that, because we'll definitely need new habits once
Anne, you are actually breaking up a lot. So if anyone who didn't hear her, Anne's kind of what she's saying is that people who are taking breaks are actually have a lot of our big high performers take a lot of breaks and are able to manage their days around this break and taking care of themselves. So I think that's really important to note. And if there's any way that you're on a mobile phone, you're chopping up a bit. But I want to jump back to Julia. What are you hearing from your bump users called bumpies during they're doing during the workday, because this is a huge shift for them, obviously, and they're talking to each other, so I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely, and again, many of the women in our community are saying that regardless of what kind of job you have, you're going to experience a higher level of stress simply because you're juggling a lot more. Beyond your own workload, you have this pregnancy, and a lot of them are finding that breathing techniques definitely help throughout the day, especially at stressful moments in time, whether it's even just putting your head down and taking a break, a mental break from what's happening around you, or finding a room, whether it's a lactation room or some sort of office that everyone has access to that you can take and use as a private space to even take a 10-minute break from your everyday so that you can feel more centered and decompress from any of the stress that you're feeling. So a lot of them seem to find that breathing helps, and that goes back to kind of the idea of yoga, but even using some of the yoga techniques or meditation techniques throughout the day. And another thing I would stress is that so many of us these days, we work through lunch. The idea of taking an hour break to go do something is kind of in this day and age. And during your pregnancy, this is an important time to make yourself take that break, to get up from your desk, just to even have a change of scenery. If you're going outside and getting a breath of fresh air, or finding a coworker and going downstairs to grab a beverage. These are important just mental breaks for you, and it just gets you back into a better emotional space if you're just feeling a little down or if you're feeling stressed out. So those are important breaks to take.
That's great. That's great to know. And as we go to the next slide, Anne, I'd love your insight on what leading employers are doing to support moms-to-be.
Okay, well, hopefully you can hear me better, because I think I had a bad connection.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So leading employers do understand that they're in a partnership with their expectant parents to help the transition to parenthood as successful as possible for both the individual and the organization. And that means everything from little things like sending home a baby basket with information on policies and resources, as well as, things for the new baby, providing flexibility in terms of the work hours and locations so that you can make those doctor's appointments and work, around them. Checking in and really thinking about, how the work's going to get done, especially during your maternity leave, as a team. So it feels like you have the team support behind you. Very innovative. This Vodafone just announced that they will pay new mothers 6 weeks full-time for 30 hours of work to help them with that adjustment, because they found that they were most at risk of losing, new parents, new moms, within the first 6 months of returning to work. And in all of the research that I've seen, that is a fairly typical scenario for many organizations. So they went to this policy as a way of making it that investment in the transition to parenthood so that new parents would return full-time after 6 months really ready to work and committed to the firm. Goldman Sachs is doing something I think that's really interesting and innovative. They have an on-site expectant parent coordinator through their EAP program that anybody who works at Goldman can access, as well as any family member. And what they've told me is that 20% of the expectant parent clients, if you will, have been men who are coming to ask, to find out more information about what the firm offers and also get advice on how to transition to parenthood well. So those are just examples.
That's great to know. I love the aspect of team support, and that really that managers are kind of creating this, like we're in this together, because I think, that just relieves so much stress on that employee. And it's interesting to talk about men. I mean, right now, obviously, we're focusing on the pregnant employees, but we should not neglect their partners and influence the future. And it's probably they're called different discussion, but it's something for all of those people, our employees out there to keep in mind. So in terms of Melissa, I wanted to touch on how much stress is too much stress for a pregnant woman. Worry and hours and frequent appointments and practices at home. What can women be doing to manage their own stress?
So to answer the question about too much stress, I think it's actually more a factor of the kind of stress. So, the reason that stress is actually detrimental to everyone's health is that the stress that makes us feel out of control or excessively worried can cause blood pressure to go up, can cause heart rate or pulse to go up, it can cause blood sugar to go up, all because of excessive release of stress hormones. So we certainly want to mitigate that by managing our stress more effectively all the time, but especially during pregnancy. And I think that the best way to manage stress in general is kind of a three-pronged approach. The first thing is, as I mentioned earlier, it's sort of the same thing, to really plan your schedule carefully and to plan your short and long-term sort of life pictures. So right now I'm working, I'm pregnant, I'm looking for child care, I'm looking for someone to help me with this at home, kind of like in blocks, like this is what I'm doing now, this is what I'm going to do next month, and then the next month. The next thing is really taking excellent care of yourself and pampering yourself, because that stress is going to have of your daily life is going to have more of an impact when you're pregnant. So making sure that you get enough sleep, doing some of the things we saw in the prior slide, like yoga, relaxation techniques, gentle, healthy exercise. That's very, very important. And then finally, the third part really is trying to look at your daily life and say, what are the things that are making me feel anxious or scared or frightened, and come up with solutions for those things. And I think, an example, in my own experience, I was lucky enough to learn from other women in my career that child care was going to be a huge concern. But all of these other women who were cardiologists said to me the most important thing to alleviate your stress is to find someone great and pay them well and treat them well. And I think when you kind of know that that's what you're going to have to do, you think about that in advance so you can plan for that next phase of your life when someone's going to help you after the baby's born.
Yes. Many important points. And before we go any further, I also want to, if there's anyone who's has beeping in their background, if you could mute your microphone, because we are hearing a beep pickup. But planning, obviously, planning is incredibly important, both in your day-to-day and in the long term. And definitely those to-do lists with child care and what that child care solution might be is up there. And, asking for help, I think you bring up an important point of, leaning on, your friends, your family, and your employer. If your employer offers services like dry cleaning services, use them. If they have an in-house massage, every Monday or something, make sure you're on the top of that list, or that nap room. It's okay. And also, if they have a service like care.com that offers house cleaning, use it. We talk about that a lot here. So it's important to talk to your manager too. So that
Katie,
also.
It's Ann. I just wanted to say when I first wrote the book, what everything a working mother needs to know, the media used to ask me, can women really have it all? And my response was, yes, absolutely, women can have it all if they're not doing it all. You can't do it all. And
Right.
I think women do have a tendency to want to do it all. But, if they think of this whole transition to parenthood as a team sport, I keep going back to that, both at work and at home, they'll set up the support mechanisms so that they don't have to do it all.
Right.
That's a great point. And yeah, go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, I would add to what Ann's point is, and also about stress. I think there are two different buckets of stress. Obviously, there is, during your pregnancy, you stress out a lot about things that may not necessarily be in your control, as well as then all the others in your life. So it's really important to recognize there are certain things that are outside of your control, and then there are things that you can actively make a difference, like your health and getting enough rest, as well as what's really helpful. And I know when you're going through a pregnancy, at least when I was, you're really looking at your week. You're in week 25, and you're hyper-focused on that week. It might be a helpful thing for women to also kind of break down their schedule into more bite-sized, manageable chunks like this. What are your to-dos for this week at work? Kind of how you set up for your own pregnancy. This week you're going to the OB/GYN. You are getting, you're setting up a 529 plan for your child. Those types of things, so that you feel like you can manage all the different aspects of your life that is very busy. And if you think about the whole thing in total, it can be very overwhelming. But once you break it up into kind of these weekly tasks for yourself, you'll just feel like you're more in control of the aspects that you can control.
And it's important, to tie those two together. I think, you have all of these to-do lists, right? And what you need to do this week, and what you can give to your partner, or, maybe even your parents want to help, and really kind of, yes, you want to do it all, but your pregnancy is probably time to prep yourself for this new life of of trying to figure out who your village is and how you can lean on everybody to get so much. Because and because the looming issue, I think that brings us to our next slide, is really is planning for the time that you are away. Often, employees are left to do as much work for that, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks or more, that they're going to be gone or less. But I think that it's this establishing this plan is also on their to-do list.
Right.
So, Julia, what is the best way to plan for when you'll be out?
Right. So you make the best possible plan, knowing that that may change down the line. But this is really an opportunity to have a very open conversation with your or your employer so that you're setting expectations on both sides, for them as well as the rest of the organization and yourself, and knowing that things may change down the line, but this actually gives everyone the best opportunity to plan for the fact that you will be out for a certain number of weeks for maternity leave. So when you go in there, you really do want to have an idea in your mind of whether you are going to be, how much time you're planning on taking off, as well as being organized and coming in with a plan of who in the organization may be able to pick up any of the work that is going to be, that were part of your responsibilities that someone else can handle. And then you want to be able to start training your replacement, whether it's a maternity leave fill-in or if it's other people in your organization, and you want to also be able to give them enough time to prepare for the fact that they are going to be taking on extra work. So the sooner you can have those conversations, as well as your manager, you're going to be setting everybody up for success. And you're going to be setting expectations so that when you are out, it doesn't really leave people feeling like they're in a lurch. And the same thing goes for at home. We talked about this a little bit earlier, is that you can't do it all. But here is an opportunity to really talk to other friends who may have children and how they've done it. Really, they are your best playbook to see what kind of different options you have out there, as well as if you live near family, to really have them involved with your pregnancy. Generally, people are really excited in your family and among your friends that you are going through this very special time in life, and they do want to help. But they need to know from you what kind of help you're looking for. So it's really important to have those conversations both at home, with your partner, with your extended family and friends, as well as at work with your manager and your teammates. And really, this can be an opportunity on the work front for a lot of people involved in projects that they've never worked on. So they might be excited, too. It's really setting them up for success by giving them the information that they need to do your job well. So that comes back. And again, whenever you can have help, it is going to be critical leading up to your pregnancy and definitely post-pregnancy to have a few hours in the day for yourself so that you can kind of get back in touch with who you are and then be in a better frame of mind to deal with any other stresses that come up.
Yeah, that's so much, right? When you first get home from that hospital, it's so much. So and so exciting all at the same time. But definitely leaning on your support team and having that in place is great. And knowing your work is at work and not at home with you is incredibly important. And
I'd like to add one, if I could just add one comment after having heard now from both Ann and Julie. We were talking about the concept of you can have it all, but you can't do it all. But I think the other thing that a lot of women stress about during pregnancy is how am I really going to continue to do everything that I've done and achieve my goals. And I think the one thing that we've really tried to help, the women that I mentor understand is you can have it all eventually, but you may not be able to have it all at the same time. And so I think being realistic about that plan that you create for when you do go back to work and sort of your career trajectory, I think depending on the amount of involvement that you want to have with your family, I think it's really important to understand that it's okay to scale back a little bit. And I think Mother Nature sort of takes care of that for us a lot of times, where we actually have this little baby and decide, well, this is really somebody I want to spend a lot of time with. So, I think it's important to realize that there may be changes in sort of your life in addition to having a new family member, and you just need to be receptive and flexible about those possible changes.
So such an important point. I think even with my last maternity back, just to have patience. Your whole transition can really take 6 months or so to feel like a normal person again, and not to rush it. I think that's incredibly helpful. Thank you for adding that, Melissa. So Anne, for employers, what should managers be doing to establish a calm plan for their employees?
So I would say the best thing that organizations can do is support their managers in having this dialogue and constructing the plan with their team. So, every team is different, everybody's job is a little bit different, but there can be consistency in the approach, and that means just helping managers understand what are the questions that they have. So, very basic things from how long do you expect to be on leave, to what are we going to do with who are your internal clients, who do you work with on a regular basis, who are your external clients or customers, how should we communicate with them, just helping managers, giving them some guidance, almost like a checklist of here's the things that you need to work out with your employee who's about to go on leave. And I think that just gives managers a great, I have found, and all of the research that we've done, that managers, for the most part, want to do the right thing, but they're not necessarily sure what that is. So the more HR can give managers guidance, just very simple guidance around how to have the conversation, how to construct, what they need to think about in constructing a solid transition plan, both for having, the person going out and when she returns. That's the best thing that employers can do.
And what's interesting, because we're talking about, HR and how HR can help, and, this employee might be the first person to go on leave in their company, but also HR might be an office full of people who have never gone on maternity leave themselves. And this is actually a question that has come in, and I'd love to have your insight here, but, if no one in your HR department has experienced pregnancy, and not really understanding what you might be going through, it makes sense for HR to kind of take this on as like, we're going to ask, we're going to lean on certain information to find out how we can understand, be compassionate, empathetic, helpful.
And I think that may be, we in the U.S. the birth rate is barely at 2 kids per person, so that isn't. This only is going to happen a couple times, if that, in a person's career. So it could very well be the case that HR hasn't dealt with this before, but they have probably dealt with other kinds of leave, and I think for whatever reason we tend to see related leave in a different category, but it shouldn't be. And if they have for those HR managers listening who've never had, been through it themselves or had somebody in their organization go through a maternity leave, think about other leaves, medical leaves of any kind. Leaves for active people who are on active service in the military and on in the reserve who get called up. Like, there's even less time to think about that. Leaves for people who have to deal with elder care issues. Again, those often happen in very unpredictable ways. At least with pregnancy, you have, if you're not announcing your pregnancy until after your first trimester, you still have 6 months to plan this out. That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And Melissa, Katie, I would add that that having someone approach this place of support and empathy is so important for the employee, because at the end of the day, if this person is an asset to the company, you really do want to hear out what are their concerns and how you can make this experience positive so that they do want to come back to work. If they are an asset and they have been planning after their maternity leave to come back. And so much of what we hear in our bumpy community is that they feel a lot of trepidation about approaching their employer and letting them know this piece of information, because they're just not sure how kind of reception they're going to get. And I think when you have an organization that is set up to really feel like you can talk to them and not feel alienating, that's really a huge part of the battle.
That's interesting. It's like the more supportive HR is during your pregnancy, the more feelings of support you'll have during that maternity leave towards going back. That you'll have that support once you go back because they were so supportive during your pregnancy.
That's what I was saying in the beginning. That this is a very sensitive time. People do feel vulnerable, and so the signals you send will have a sort of heightened effect. And if you send positive, strong signals that this is going to be okay, that we're totally committed to you as an employee for the long term, that will go a long way to ensuring that you're employed that way in return.
Yeah, that's great. And we're all kind of talking about this maternity leave and leading up to this maternity leave. But what is a contingency plan? I mean, we plan for our due date, maybe even having things in place 2 to 4 weeks before D-Day. But is that early enough? And Melissa, what if this doesn't go according to plan? What signs should a pregnant employee be looking out for? And at what point do you think they should have things ready just in case, to go on bed rest? And I'll let you answer that.
Sure. So, I mean, I think for the most part, usually after about 20 to 22 weeks, the visits are going to be more frequent. Healthy checks just for blood pressure. They'll take the urine sample to look for protein and look for signs of swelling. So those visits are going to become more frequent, and sort of between 24 and 30 weeks is that really vulnerable time when, if women do exhibit any signs of elevated blood pressure or swelling, or certainly any type of premature contraction that is, progressive or that stays for more than a few minutes. Those are all things that will lead you to having to take bed rest. And I certainly think after about 20 weeks, you really want to kind of have that contingency plan in place, because that's really that critical time that if there are sort of early complications, you're going to really need to rest and take really the last trimester to trimester and a half of the pregnancy off. So I think, while majority of women, thankfully, are healthy and well and don't have to do that are not uncommon. And so, really having that sort of plan, so who will, if, for instance, I had to go on bed rest and I had a 3-year-old. So, who will take care of your other family when you are resting, is a big thing, and kind of having that in addition to your roles at work and through your employer, and sort of understanding how that will affect your leave after you have your baby. So I really think that you certainly don't necessarily need to look into that with HR, in advance, but I think once your doctor has said, I think you need to take time off, then it's certainly important to speak with HR and find out about the type of, perhaps you can take a disability, short-term disability impact your leave, but it's different in different environments. So that's a very important conversation to have once you sort of get the hint that you're going to need to take some breaks. And I think I kind of covered the things that you should be on the lookout for, but really swelling in the feet, fatigue, increased shortness of breath, or certainly if you go to the doctor or your midwife and they tell you that you have elevated blood pressure or, protein in your urine or a significant amount of swelling. I think those are all the things that you really want to watch out for in addition to contractions. Those are really the key things that are tip-offs.
So, I mean, it's like we keep coming back to this planning and communication with your partner, your team, and your doctor, probably, of how your work is affecting you and your feelings. And I think what's important to note is that what we keep talking about is it comes down to planning and communication, but you're not the only person who has to create this plan. Lean on your team because you'll need this team after the baby comes too. And I want to make sure we get to the questions, but Anne, is there anything you want to add about how managers should properly, and compassionately communicate what and when they need without stressing their employee out more?
Well, I think, it's what we've all been saying, communicate as much as possible ahead of time. Try not to leave things to the last minute. Plan out the work that has to be, 2 weeks from now instead of 2 days from now. So that's just good management, and managers should be encouraged to practice those skills all the time, but they're even more important, during this time when unexpected things can happen. And, the more kind of intentional you are about the flow of the work for everyone, including your pregnant employee.
Well, it's interesting, and perhaps HR can host workshops to help managers and help train managers on how to have this open communication and planning without adding more stress to the employee.
And actually, there are some companies that are doing that. They're providing coaching for managers. So HR will reach out to a manager, and as soon as they learn that there's somebody on that team who's expecting, and I think that's a great idea, just to give that manager a little bit of extra support in terms of the manager's role, and that seems to be working very well.
Thank you all so much. It's all so interesting. And I want time to answer some questions that have come in and call attention just to our Care.com workplace blog at the address here, where we cover a lot of these topics. So first, I'd love to talk about travel and work. And Melissa, do you have any advice for moms who travel for work and how they can care?
Oh, absolutely. So, the thing is just to kind of understand that when you're pregnant, you need to move around every hour. You move around, and that is if you're on a train, and if you're driving, you need to get out of the car, get up, move around. And certainly, and most importantly, if you're on an airplane, and as we know, a lot of physicians will restrict flight after about 32 weeks, and some earlier depending on your health. But flying is a very important area to remember, because when you fly, you lose a lot of excess moisture from your mouth just because you're breathing on that dry airplane, and so you need to remember to drink plenty of water and stay well hydrated. Also especially important because pregnant women are actually predisposed to blood clots in the legs anyway, so you need to get up and walk around at least every 30 to 50 minutes on an airplane, even just for a few minutes, just to get that blood flowing in those legs, and you know, flex your calves and just move around a little bit. Another thing that's really important is to remember that when you travel, typically that means that you're going to have to eat in restaurants or eat at, you know, corporate dinners. And food that's prepared through hotels typically is extremely high in salt. And the further you are in your pregnancy, the more your body wants to hold on to salt, and along comes water. So if you eat something that is really salty and you haven't been eating salt throughout your pregnancy, you are going to gain a lot of fluid, and that can actually be not really helpful to your health and can be potentially detrimental. So you want to be cautious about the food that you eat when you are attending, you know, events while traveling, and really try to go for low sodium options, or even say to the chef, if you can, listen, this needs to be cooked without salt, because it's really not helpful when a woman's pregnant to eat sodium-containing foods, because they can cause that additional swelling in the feet. So those are the keys, I think, you know, what you eat, what you drink, obviously getting plenty of rest and exercise while traveling.
And I would just add to what Melissa said, that even though most commercial airlines allow travel up to 36 weeks, you really should talk to your OB about whether that's going to be the right decision for you based on your personal health, because it's not worth the risk if you are having pregnancy or any other conditions. I would really vet any sort of travel in your second try leading up to your third, whether you should be traveling at all for the health of yourself and your baby.
That's great. You guys, I want to get some more questions in that's coming from our audience, and actually we have a poll up right now that most attendees from this webinar said that maintaining their job performance is the thing that's stressing them out the most. Any tips for people who have a lot of pressure on themselves to keep up their work? And Julia, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. This goes back to being organized and being proactive and coming up with the game plan of what's going to happen with your projects. You know, it really helps to list out what are your core responsibilities and what are the tasks that other teams take on your behalf while you're away, as well as which projects you think you can accomplish before your maternity leave. So that's very clear to your employer or manager. Longer lead time projects that you're not going to complete, and be very upfront and straightforward about that, but also come up with a solution. Like, who else on the team would love to take on this project? And it's really involving those people early on in those conversations, that your work support team, and having them begin to kind of integrate themselves into your world and your responsibilities early. So having them go to those key meetings and start taking yourself out of them, and also picking up the projects early on enough so that there are no lingering questions in case you do go on maternity leave early or unexpectedly, that no one knows how to pick up where you left off. So again, I think it really comes back to tapping into the resources that you have at work, your coworkers, your teammates, your colleagues, and just in constant contact with your manager is really important, so that they understand if you're having challenges in your pregnancy and things change, that they're aware of these changes and that it doesn't leave them in a lurch as well.
Yeah,
I would just follow up on that, and that we all tend to prioritize from a sense of urgency, but it's a really good habit to start to prioritize from what, and as opposed to, what's the next thing that's got to get done? What's the most important thing that's got to get done? And to ask your manager that, to say, okay, what is most important to you? And start to develop that habit both for yourself and your whole team. And the same goes for what's going on at home. To ask, what's the most important thing as opposed to what's the most urgent thing.
And Melissa, this question kind of came in, I think you'd be the best one for it. If a woman is out with high blood pressure, can she work from home on a laptop? Is that okay?
So I think that's really up to certainly the physician and the patient. That is the first decision. So is it healthy for mom to work from home, or the soon-to-be mom? And if it is, then I think that is something that is also worked out with the employee. I've been through a similar an employee where we did create a sort of part-time option for her to work from home, so that she could were not really stressful, but that would be very helpful during that period of time. And I think it depends on certainly the patient, but also on the ability of the employer in carving out perhaps either a part-time option or something that's a little bit of a flex time type thing that involve sort of scaling back the whole role, I think, for most employees.
Right, and the employer ask that of the employee to be working still?
I think that I think not. I think that the employee. I think that if a physician has ask a patient to go on bed rest, that is a medical statement. I think that if the employee feels, I'm in bed 11 hours a day, I'm so bored, I could sit here and crank through something, then I think it's up to that employee can certainly speak with their doctor about it and then speak with their manager and HR to see if it could be a possibility of doing something like that. And I think that for some women that is a good option because what it does is it preserves some of their leave depending on the type of disability they have. And again, that's very specific to the situation. But I think it should not come from the employer, certainly.
And to finish this, I want to do a lightning round, but I also, for everyone listening, if you're an employee and you're worried about bringing this conversation up with your manager or with your HR representative, I encourage you to at least maybe even email them this webinar when you receive it in the next 24 hours and say, it sounded really helpful to like you, and that might open the eyes of discussion with an HR of what they can do more. But before we go, I do want to do a lightning round with everybody of what's one thing either you wish you knew when you were a pregnant employee or that you wish you could tell managers when you were of pregnant employees. And Julia, I'll start with you.
Hey, this is one. During my pregnancy, I've had the benefit of having a great manager, but I think a lot of what we hear in our bump community is if I were to pass on information to a manager, is to know that just because I'm a pregnant woman, I'm not slacking off. I'm still committed to work. I'm still committed to putting in my best, but to ask the manager to be supportive and flexible. So the schedule may not look the same. I may not always be in at 9 to 5, but I will get the work done. And to have that bit of flexibility and support from your manager goes such a long way. And that,
great.
And again, I would say, not every woman's pregnancy is the same. And so managers should really look at the individual. So they can't expect, Jane, well, she was pregnant and it was fine, and how come, Mary's pregnancy is she's out all the time and she's going on appointments, is to really treat your employees with some and empathy, and to know that they really are trying their best, but they are juggling a lot, and to give them that support and flexibility.
That's great. Melissa, what would you add?
One of the things that I would just like to add is, especially for employees out there who may work in a field that's predominantly male, sometimes this is uncharted territory, and it's really important to have a support network of other people who do what you do, maybe not where you do it, and reach out and develop that sort of community so that you can run questions past people and ask them specific questions that will apply to you. And I think that is certainly in my field, 16% of cardiologists are female, and back when I was training, probably 8%. So it was hard to even discuss pregnancy, much less leave. I think have changed for me, but there are more in sort of very, very male-dominated fields. So that if you have it within your employer site, but also outside to give you that extra boost because you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
That's huge. Anne, what would you add?
So to follow up on that, that your most important support network is going to be your partner. And, throughout the pregnancy, you need to involve your partner in what's going on as much as possible. Think about how to have your partner take, new parental leave. And most importantly, and the thing that I would say I learned from my experience is that you really have to be very intentional about making sure that your partner is involved in all the things that are going on at home so that when you return to work, everything isn't your responsibility to get done. The research shows that since you're probably going to be home longer than your partner, you end up sort of taking control of a lot of things that you used to divide up. And that doesn't go back to the way
seeing from this poll is for HR that people are very stressed out. 22% of our attendees today are pretty stressed out about what child care is going to be. And from other surveys that we've done, they're realizing how expensive it is for the first time. They've gone on daycare tours, and their favorite daycare center is incredibly expensive, and they don't know that this is on their mind, as well as all of the work they have to prepare for this leave. So empathy and compassion and setting up those support systems, even if it's a new moms group or a expectant parents group, or those kinds of networks where they can be talking to other people with HR listening about what they need is incredibly helpful and supportive. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending today, and thank you to all of our panelists and to our listeners out there. And please, we'd love to hear from you. Call Workplace Solutions, the number on the screen. You can always email us at workplacesolutions@care.com, and we'd love to hear from you and hear what's on your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.